Hello Grade 12s and welcome to this English home language lesson on reading for meaning and understanding. My name is Marinda Swanepoel and I'm very excited to spend this time with you. Let's get into it. When we look at the curriculum scope, reading and viewing has a few components. It's reading for meaning and understanding, the summary, visual analysis, and language structures and conventions. Our focus today is on reading for meaning and understanding. Our concept map consists of the following. We're going to focus on reading strategies, verbs of questioning and the requirements of each, the scaffolding of questions and the strategic approach to each question and the question order, and then answering techniques. By the end of the lesson, we will address the following: using effective reading strategies, understanding verbs of questioning and the requirements of each of those, understanding the scaffolding of questions and using a strategic approach to question order, developing context-based answers that are clear and, of course, substantiated. We will also focus on how to answer questions on tone, diction, irony, satire, style, and imagery. The last thing we'll focus on is understanding the function of the introduction and the conclusion of a piece of writing. Key words and language that you should keep in mind while we're going through the lesson consist of the following. Skimming, which is a reading technique. It means quickly reading through a text to get a general idea of the contents without focusing on the details. Scanning, rapidly searching through a text to find specific information. Another term you should be familiar with is in context. This is where you provide a response that considers the surrounding text and information and the specifics given in the text. You also need to be aware of the style. Style is the way a writer writes, including his or her word choice and sentence structure. Some more key words that you need to keep in mind include diction, which is word choice or vocabulary, tone, which shows the writer's attitude towards the subject. Irony, of course, is a contrast between what is expected and what occurs, that's situational irony, or when the intended meaning is the opposite of what is said. Another term you should be familiar with is satire. That is using humor, irony, sarcasm, or exaggeration to criticize, expose, or highlight human, political, or social weaknesses. And this is in an attempt to change the situation. And our last key word is imagery. This is using descriptive words and figures of speech to create pictures in the reader's mind. What should you be able to do? You should be able to skim and scan text features, make connections and monitor for comprehension, read for main ideas, answer in context, develop clear, detailed answers, focus on word choice and language structures, and again, style, irony, satire, tone, and diction. Common content errors include the following: not following each question's requirements precisely, giving generic answers without substantiation from the text, misunderstanding questions or lifting without an explanation, and then again, difficulty with irony, tone, diction, and the graphical interpretation. Exam writing competency skills include reading skills, critical thinking skills, time management, information retrieval skills, communication skills, active learning methods, and vocabulary skills. Now, before we continue, let's go for a quick ad break. I'll see you in just a little bit. Welcome back, Grade 12s. Let's jump into the next part of our lesson. Now we are going to focus on reading strategies. Reading strategies have a few content problems. This includes limited vocabulary, lack of background knowledge, difficulty with complex sentences, trouble identifying main ideas, poor inference skills, lack of engagement with the text, of course, also being intimidated by the text length, inadequate reading strategies, and of course, anxiety and time pressure. In exams, reading skills will be tested in the following ways. You will be tested on identifying the main idea. That means understanding the primary message or the theme of the text. You will also be asked to find specific details. You will have to locate particular information within the text. The next thing you must be able to do is understand information. That means grasping both clearly stated and suggested content. Context clues mean determining the meaning of unfamiliar words based on the surrounding text. More skills that you'll have to focus on is text structure and content. That means recognizing how the text is organized, including events and procedures. You will also be tested on following instructions. That means accurately interpreting and following the directions provided in the text. Identifying relationships is so important. Recognizing connections between ideas such as cause and effect or even solutions to problems. Comparing and distinguishing. That means differentiating between facts, opinions, evidence, hypotheses within the text. And then also, you must be able to make inference. That means drawing logical conclusions from the information. Now let's look at some reading strategies. Step 1 with reading strategies is to skim the passage quickly. You get a general idea of what the passage is about. You identify what the main focus of the passage is, and you determine the most important information. Then, step 2, read the passage and link it to the title. Consider how the title relates to the content and the purpose of the passage. The title can explain the time, style, and the subject of the text. The introduction also sets the scene, and the conclusion often summarizes the author's intention. A good tip is to do the first 2 steps in your 10 minutes reading time before you are allowed to start writing. Step 3 is asking yourself leading questions. While you are reading, ask yourself the following. Who is involved? What is the main idea? Where and when does this take place? And why was it written? What is the purpose of the text? Also ask yourself how the message is expressed. Now, once you've finished step 1, 2, and 3, step 4 is to read the questions. Focus on the key words in the questions to understand exactly what is being asked. In step 5, you read the passage again. Reread the text, but now with a clearer understanding of what the questions require. You also highlight the main idea in each paragraph. Use highlighters, pens, underline, make sure that you find key information in the text. Keep the questions in mind while you are rereading. Step 6 is answering the questions. Always identify and underline or highlight the verbs of questioning and the keywords that the question requires you to focus on. This will ensure that you understand what the question requires just as you understand what the text is explaining. Answer the questions using your understanding of the passage. Always be familiar with the different types of questions and the instructional words or verbs of questioning. The next aspect of our lesson is verbs of questioning and the requirements of each of these. Content problems include the following: the lack of understanding the terminology, not applying the knowledge in context, and also not following the instructions. Some popular verbs of questioning include the following: account for. This sounds very difficult and intimidating, but actually it only means give a reason or say why. Explain is another popular verb of questioning. It means focus on the given lines and provide a detailed response, giving detailed reasons. The next verb of questioning is discuss. Here you explore the text from different viewpoints. That's very important, grade 12s, using examples and explain your understanding clearly. Justify is a word that you are familiar with. This means give reasons to support your statement. And of course, these reasons will be based on the context of the text. Comment on, what do you think? Provide evidence from the text to support your opinion. And then the last verb of questioning is critically comment. This means you give a detailed analysis of the required information with evidence, as always substantiate, always justify, and your responses must go beyond what is stated in the text. The next part of our lesson, we will look at the scaffolding of questions and the strategic approach to question order. Content problems include limited vocabulary, not following the sequence of text and/or questions, not connecting ideas, only providing literal answers, poor justification, that means your answers aren't supported, or skipping difficult questions. Some other problems include not managing your time effectively and not analyzing and interpreting the text and the questions successfully. Let's look at the question breakdown. 40% of the questions will focus on understanding the text. These questions are straightforward and the answers are found directly in the text. The answers are given to you, grade 12s. The other 40% is on making inferences. So they require you to infer answers based on the information given in the text. The answers are not directly stated, so a good understanding of the text is necessary. This is why it's important to read the text more than once. 20% will focus on insight and application. These questions test your ability to apply, analyze, and evaluate the information, again, given in the text. You need a deep understanding of the text to answer these questions effectively. Now let's look at types of comprehension questions. Of course, there are the general comprehension questions where they test your understanding. For example, comment on the writer's argument presented in paragraph 1. There are also vocabulary questions and they test your knowledge of word meanings. Explain what the writer means by endless uncertainty. Technical type questions are questions that test the style, presentation, or construction of the text, how it is written, how it is presented. For example, explain the writer's purpose in referring to various research findings. Now, before we continue with our lesson, let's go for a quick ad break. I'll see you in just a little bit. Welcome back, grade 12s. Let's jump into the next part of this lesson, which is answering techniques. Content problems include the following: lifting from the text. That means quoting chunks from the text without an explanation. Also, failing to provide a full explanation, lack of vocabulary and understanding the text, not linking graphics to the message, not following the sequence of the text and/or the questions, not connecting ideas, and only providing literal answers. Answering techniques, let's focus on the following. General comprehension questions. These are literal or factual questions. Focus on what the passage states directly. The answers, grade 12s, are in the text. We are giving you the answers. The next aspect we're looking at is inferential questions. They require you to read between the lines. So you're looking for implied emotions, attitudes, or points of view. Vocabulary questions focus on language usage. They include grammar, punctuation, and figurative language. Answers should always match the context of the passage. Technical questions focus on how the text is presented. Questions may ask you about the use of statistics, rhetorical questions, diction, or even style. Style questions, here you identify the style and the register, such as narrative or descriptive. You must also comment on the effectiveness of style or justify its use, why that particular style is appropriate to the type of text. Here you can also discuss the writer's objectivity or subjectivity towards a certain aspect. Tone questions are important. Tone reflects the writer's feelings and attitude. This is so important, grade 12s, not your attitude, the writer's attitude towards a specific subject identified through diction. So you will look at the diction, the word choice, the sentence structure, and of course, punctuation. A tip is to always look at tone, and tone is described by using adjectives. Answering each question. First, use the keywords. Let the keywords guide you to the answer. So you look at the keyword in the question, you go to the text, the textual reference, and you find those keywords. Always double check. Before writing down your answer, ask yourself if your answer fully addresses the question. That's so important. Always ensure that you answer all parts of the question. Questions will have 2 or 3 marks, some even 4, and you must answer all parts of the question. Use context clues. If you don't know a word, try to find its meaning, deduce the meaning from the surrounding text. Giving balanced responses, so for questions about similarities or differences, comparisons or irony, give a well-rounded answer that covers both sides. Now we're going to do an activity to practice all the things that we learned today. Our reading skills, our knowledge of verbs of questioning, how to answer the text, how to answer questions. So the text we're looking at today says the role of technology in modern healthcare. You'll use your skimming and scanning skills to go through the text. Technology has dramatically altered the landscape of modern healthcare. From advanced diagnostic tools to telemedicine, technology has made healthcare more efficient, accessible, and personalized. But has this technological revolution also led to new challenges? Alarm bells are going off, grade 12s. There's a rhetorical question. On the positive side, technology allows for more accurate diagnosis and personalized treatment plans. Patients can now access their medical records online, schedule virtual consultations, and receive reminders for their medications through mobile apps. The ease of access empowers patients to improve overall health outcomes. The text continues on the next slide. However, this again sounds alarm bells because I know that a contrast is coming. The reliance on technology raises concerns about data security, patient privacy, and the potential loss of the human touch in healthcare. The more we depend on technology, the greater the risk of breaches and the loss of personal interaction, which is crucial to patient care. Balancing technological advancements with human elements is essential for delivering high-quality, compassionate healthcare in the future. So we've quickly skimmed through our passage. Now we'll look at the questions. Question 1, account for. There is that verb of questioning. Give a reason why. The use of the rhetorical question, but has this technological revolution also led to new challenges? There is my textual reference, and there are some generic answers that you can use for rhetorical questions, but those are only answer starters. You must always add specifics. So to make the reader think about the benefits and the problems that technology brings. So this question makes us think about what. Well, we find the what inside the sentence. It encourages critical thinking. It engages the reader for 2 marks. Our next example, question 1.2, here is the textual reference, paragraph 2. We always go back to the textual reference. Identify is the verb of questioning. The tone used in these lines. Make sure you go back to the text. So on the positive side, we know that we look for diction, for words to find tone. Here is the word positive, but positive is not strong enough. It can help to guide you in the right direction, but it's not strong enough as an answer. Technology allows for more accurate diagnosis, personalized treatment plans. Patients can now access their medical records online, schedule virtual consultations, receive reminders for their medications. This ease of access empowers patients and improves overall health outcomes. You'll see that we have a follow-up question which asks to comment about the suitability of the tone. So we see that the tone is hopeful or optimistic. The writer is excited about the possible benefits. Then the appropriateness of the tone, it's suitable because it highlights all of the benefits of technology. For example, so always give a reference but don't lift. So you may lift little pieces from the text to support your answers, to justify. So enhances learning experiences, vast resource, empowers patients, there's a sense of improvement, and these positive phrases support the idea that technology is making healthcare more efficient and more accessible. So that aligns with the optimistic tone. Question 1.3. Critically discuss how the diction in paragraph 3 conveys the writer's attitude towards technology in healthcare. And you must also provide 2 examples of diction. So diction is word choice. We've read this passage before, so now we're scanning for those keywords. There are things like raises concerns about data security, potential loss of the human touch, the greater the risk of breaches, loss of personal interaction. So here we see that the writer is negative, but again, negative is not strong enough. So concerned, worried. Here we go, cautious. The writer is cautious. His attitude towards technology in healthcare, he is quite worried about that. And then you'll see wherever there's a diction question, you must provide diction. Diction doesn't have to be only one word, it could be more than one word. So raises concerns, risk of breaches, show that the writer is worried about these issues like data security and the potential loss of personal contact. You base your answer on the text and you prove from the passage. Question 1.4 is the irony question, of course, a very popular question. Discuss the irony evident in paragraph 3. That's my limit. So irony, of course, when the opposite of what is meant is stated. So we're looking at the paragraph. The reliance on technology raises concerns about data security. It's the passage we just did as well. The loss of personal interaction. And then, of course, remember, when you're doing an irony question, you must look at both sides and you must explain both sides. So the irony is that technology, which is supposed to improve healthcare, might actually cause problems like losing the human touch and increasing security risks. So this shows that the writer is again cautious about depending too much on technology because it could do more harm than it will do good. Question 1.5 is a popular question. You must learn how to answer this question. Refer to paragraph 4, there's my textual reference. Is the final paragraph an appropriate conclusion? So you've been taught that conclusions summarize, they don't introduce new information, they emphasize the writer's point. Here is the conclusion. It talks about balancing advancements and human elements in providing healthcare. So you can always use something like it summarizes the main point, but that won't be enough. Of course, you have to give a detailed answer. So while technology is useful, it needs to be balanced with human care as well. And this conclusion ties together the benefits and the challenges. That's a great way to answer the question that asks about the conclusion. Now, as you are aware, there's also a text B in Reading for Meaning and Understanding. Here is an example of a text B. It is obviously a patient in hospital and there is a robot doctor. with a clipboard seemingly attending to the patient. In the background at the door, we can see a human doctor. He looks quite worried. You can see that he's a doctor by the stethoscope around his neck, and even the patient seems quite alarmed by what is happening. The question 1.6 asks you to comment on the effectiveness of the portrayal of the robot doctor in conveying the message. So important, focus on the message, the robot doctor, and how that is effective. So it is very effective. It shows the dangers of relying too much on technology in healthcare. The robot's focus is on data while ignoring the patient, and this highlights how technology can overshadow the essential personal care needed in medicine. It clearly emphasizes the risk of technology in replacing important human interactions. Now, you'll also be aware, grade 12, that there is a comparative question, and it's for 4 marks. It has the most marks in this question. Here you have to refer to text A and text B, but read very carefully. Critically discuss, there is the verb of questioning, the extent to which text B supports the heading, the role of technology in modern healthcare, and paragraph 3. So it's not the entire text A, it's only paragraph 3, the entire text B, and the title of text A. There's a very simple recipe to answer this question. You focus on the title and you summarize what it means. Focus on text B and summarize the message. Focus on paragraph 3, summarize the message. That will be 3 marks, and you will link those for a 4th mark with a comment. The cartoon effectively supports the title of the article. Here you can see the title is included. The focus is on the use of technology in healthcare. So it's not enough to just state the title, you must explain it and the possible functions. Then you'll see paragraph 3. So here we have the title. Paragraph 3 expresses concerns about the over-reliance on technology and goes into more detail about that. And then the cartoon, that's where my 3rd mark starts. The cartoon illustrates this by showing the robot doctor focused on the data and ignoring the patient. The concerned human doctor, so it goes into more detail on text B, further highlights the fear that technology might replace human interaction. And here is the 4th mark. Both the text and the cartoon emphasizes that technology should not replace the essential human interaction in healthcare. That is all we have time for today, grade 12s. I hope that this will help you in your next exam. Please put into practice the tips that I've given you today. We've looked at reading strategies, verbs of questioning and the requirements of each, scaffolding of questions and the strategic approach to question order, and answering techniques. Take these tips, apply them in your next exam, and I hope they bring you a lot of success. Let's get started. The question paper we'll be using today is from November 2023, paper 1, question 1. Let's look at text A. Of course, this text is quite long, about 800 words, and you'll use your scanning and skimming reading techniques while you do this. So firstly, you look at the title. Listening instead of reading is Not Cheating by Gabby Hinsliff. From audiobooks to podcasts and voice notes, there's a steady generational shift in the way we understand the world. Paragraph 1 starts with insomniacs, and what's important to note here is that there's a little number 1 next to the word. That is your reference to the glossary, which you will find at the end of the passage. So let's read. Insomniacs do it in the middle of the night. Dog owners do it while trudging around the park. Some people do it in the gym, but lately I've taken to doing it alone in the car, on long journeys, north through the dark, when I need distraction from everything circling around my head. Listening, that is, and perhaps more specifically, listening to things you might once have read instead. This links to our title, Listening Instead of Reading. The growth of audiobooks, podcasts, and even voice notes, those quick self-recorded clips that are steadily taking over from typed messages on WhatsApp, reflects a steady generational shift. Already we see a repetition of what we found in the heading and in the subheading. away from eyes to ears as the way we take in the world and perhaps also how we understand it. Reading instinctively feels like the higher art, perhaps because bedtime stories used to be strictly for children, and oral storytelling is associated with more primitive cultures in the days before the printing press. But is that fair? So here you'll see the writer used a rhetorical question. If the effort involved in sitting down and decoding written words with your actual eyes were to gradually fade away in years to come, just as the old-fashioned cord of a landline phone gave way to the freedom of a mobile in your pocket and cash yielded to the clinical efficiency of credit cards, what exactly would we have lost? So another rhetorical question. Reading is still very far from dead. Lockdown rekindled the love of curling up with a good novel, to publishers' delight, with more than a third of people claiming, so some statistics, to be reading more to fill their days. But, so there's a contrast, the audiobook market is still small, also notched up its 7th year of double-digit growth in the 2021 pandemic year. Millennials, in particular, seem to be all ears. Katie Vanek Smith, the former Wall Street Journal president, admitted recently that when its members, who are mostly under the age of 39 years old, so we'll have some extra information in brackets, were asked what they wanted to read, the consensus was, actually, I listen, I don't read. But their parents do so too. All the overloaded, frantically multitasking midlifers trying to keep up with whatever zeitgeist, so again, a reference to the glossary you'll find at the end of the text, they are afraid of missing out on an information-saturated world while going for a run or cooking dinner. Yet, so that shows a contrast, the idea prevails that listening is flighty or unserious. A snooty 55% of respondents to one YouGov survey back in 2016 deemed audiobooks a lesser way of consuming literature, and only 10% thought listening to a book was wholly equal to reading it. The view that listening is cheating prevails, so that idea is repeated, even though nobody thinks it's lazy for a student to sit through lectures. And going to the theatre is not considered intellectually inferior to reading the play at home. One study by Beth Rogoski, Associate Professor of Education at Bloomsburg University, asking students either to read a non-fiction book or listen to the audio version, found no significant differences in how much of it they absorbed. So some statistics and research. There is an intimacy too, a confessional air that suits soul-bearing podcast interviews and taboo-busting discussions, another reference to the glossary, about sex or menopause or parenting. And to hear a book read by its author is sometimes easier to understand, by the inflections in their voice, a meaning you would not otherwise have picked up. Voice notes suit the perennially anxious young in much the same way because they are less intrusive than a phone call and harder to misunderstand than text. People can hear when you are being ironic, lessening the risk of accidentally causing offense. What troubles me most about listening, I suppose, that it is harder to share. You can recommend a podcast to a friend, but you cannot leave it on the train seat for the next person when you get off, as I have done all my life with finished newspapers. You cannot give your goddaughter your dog-eared, spine-cracked copy of an audiobook that meant everything to you when you were her age. You will never buy an old audiobook from a second-hand store and find somebody else's faded notes scribbled in the margin, or a long-forgotten postcard used as a bookmark that makes you want to know more about the life of the person who sent it. Paper does not render itself useless in a power cut. All of which makes me think reading will never yield to listening completely, that, like vinyl, handwritten love letters and cinema in the age of television, it will live on for pleasure and for romance, but also because there are times when nothing else quite fits the bill. But if it turns out I'm wrong, well, you did not hear it from me. So that's the text, grade 12s, and here we find the glossary. This will help you in answering your questions. Now, before we continue with the rest of our lesson, let's go for a quick ad break. I'll see you in a little while. Welcome back, grade 12s. Now that we've read the text, let's jump right into answering the questions. Question 1.5 from the November 2023 paper asks, discuss the irony evident in paragraph 5. Remember to underline your verbs of questioning. In this case, it's discuss. What do you have to discuss? The irony, and your textual reference is paragraph 5. So remember, irony always has a contrast and you have to find the entire contrast. So here the word yet also tells me that there is a contrast. The idea prevails that listening is slightly one serious, so I'm scanning quickly through the text and I'm finding it. The view that listening is cheating prevails, even though nobody thinks it's lazy for a student to sit through lectures, and going to the theatre is not considered intellectually inferior to reading the play at home. So that's the idea. Reading is seen as more important and audiobooks are deemed lesser. There's your contrast. Now you have to develop it into an answer. Let's take a look at the answer. Listening to audiobooks is seen as lacking commitment in some quarters like lesser. Very few acknowledge that it's the ideal way of reading literature. However, so in my irony answer, I have to show both sides. People attending lectures or theatre goers are not judged in a similar way. You'll see there's a slash in this answer, which shows it could be or. So the first part or this last part of the answer would be accepted for 3 marks. The writer highlights her argument that listening is undervalued. Yet, research shows that students absorb the same amount of information whether they read or listen. So 3 marks if irony is discussed. 1 for the one side, 1 for the other side, and the 3rd mark will be for your summary or drawing those ideas together in a sentence. Let's look at the next question, which is question 1.6. Here, our textual reference referred to paragraph 6, and there's even specific lines, and they give you those lines. It's always very important, grade 12s, to go back to the text. Don't just take this little bit that they gave you, go back to the paragraph and find the context. So question 1.6.1 is identify, there's my verb of questioning, the tone used. So tone shows the writer's attitude, and we identify it through their word choice, through their diction. And to hear a book read by its author is sometimes easier to understand by the inflections in their voice, meaning you would not otherwise have picked up. Voice notes suit the perennially anxious young in much the same way because they are less intrusive than a phone call, harder to misunderstand. People can hear when you're being ironic, lessening the risk of accidentally causing offense. While you're answering 6.1, also look for the suitability of the tone. Just keep that in the back of your head. Now let's look at the answer. The writer uses a persuasive tone. She's convinced one way and she would like to convince the readers as well. She's assertive, a matter of fact, and it could even be conversational. Again, as you can see, we have the slashes, which means that any of these would be accepted in the exam. It's very important, positive or negative answers won't be given marks. Positive or negative is not strong enough. You must be more specific. They might help guide you in the right direction, but they will not be credited. Now, comment on the suitability. The tone, which is persuasive or assertive, highlights the benefits of listening in that it eliminates misinterpretations. We've all been there, grade 12s, thereby leading to greater clarity. So we're stating why she feels persuasive and what she wants to persuade the reader of. Or the pronoun you addresses the reader directly, thereby reinforcing the writer's view of the benefits of reading. So 1 mark for the tone question here, and you would get 2 marks Also, it's a good idea to include a textual reference, some evidence to support your answer. The next question, question 1.7, is also a popular question and you will be familiar with it. So critically discuss is the verb of questioning, and then the diction, that is our focus, diction, word choice. The limit or the textual reference is paragraph 7. So critically discuss how the diction in paragraph 7 conveys the writer's attitude, grade 12, it's very important, towards print media. Then the next part of the question tells you to provide 2 examples of diction in your response. It's very important to always substantiate your answers with evidence from the text. Be specific. Let's look at paragraph 7. What troubles me most? So we can already see the attitude is a little negative, worried even, I suppose, is that it is harder to share. You can recommend a podcast to a friend, but you cannot leave it on the train seat for the next person when you get off, as I have done all my life with finished newspapers. You cannot give your goddaughter a dog-eared, spine-cracked copy of an audiobook that meant everything to you when you were her age. You will never buy an old audiobook from a second-hand store and find someone else's faded notes scribbled in the margin, or a long-forgotten postcard used as a bookmark that makes you want to know more about the life of the person who sent it. Paper does not render itself useless in a power cut. Remember, we are looking for the author's attitude, the writer's attitude towards print media. So although it starts with troubles, how does she feel about print media? That is where your focus should be. So we definitely get the idea that the writer is sentimental, maybe even nostalgic about print media. Words like dog-eared and spine-cracked to qualify the longevity of books or newspapers. The references to faded notes, as you can see, there are examples, quoted examples of diction in the answer, and a long-forgotten postmark used as a bookmark convey the writer's nostalgia. She longs for those days. The writer thus emphasizes the value of print media. So here is the focus. The diction is there, the attitude is there. She believes it cannot be replaced. Very, very important. Now, here you will get 3 marks, and only if 2 examples of diction and the attitude had been critically discussed. So very important that you answer all parts of the question. Question 1.8 is referred to paragraph 8. That's your textual reference. That's where you go back to. And then this very popular question, is the final paragraph an appropriate conclusion to the article? And of course, justify your response. In this question, you must look at the conclusion, but then also how that links to the rest of the article. We know that conclusions often summarize or emphasize the main idea, and you have to find the link, the idea that is in that concluding paragraph. So all of which makes me think reading will never yield to listening completely. Remember, the entire text was about listening versus reading, the benefits of each. That like vinyl, handwritten love letters and cinema in the age of television, it will live on for pleasure or for romance, but also because there are times when nothing else quite fits the bill. And very humorously at the end, she concludes her article with, but if it turns out I'm wrong, well, you did not hear it from me. So the last paragraph emphasizes that reading will never go away. Let's look at the answer. So of course they ask you, is it suitable? You can give a yes or a no answer. It can also be a mixed response. Let's look at the yes part. She asserts, she emphasizes, she repeats her belief that reading will never be entirely replaced by listening. That they are authentic and purposeful and they will stay. However, the final sentence humorously offers the reader an opportunity to differ. So she's not set on her opinion. She says, you didn't hear it from me. If it turns out I'm wrong, It ends on a humorous note. The conclusion supports the writer's balanced view throughout the text. We see both pros and cons for each side. Both listening and reading have value in different contexts. So here you'll see in the marking directive, a no answer is unlikely, but it will be credited if it is valid and we can find merit in that answer. So you would get 3 marks here for 2 ideas well discussed. Now we're going to text B. Comment on the effectiveness of the portrayal of the woman in text B in conveying the message of text B. This is a 3-mark question. As you know, there will be a text A and text B. Text B normally is a more visual text and it has, of course, writing in it as well. If we quickly take a look at text B, you'll see there's a woman driving. Obviously, she's in a car. You can see that she has her earphones inside, and then we can look at the words, take an adventure through the Amazon. Your commute just got a little more interesting with audible.com. That's our advertiser. With thousands of books to choose from, you can listen to your favorite adventure novels whenever you want. So you have plenty of time to let your imagination explore the jungle. So we have to find the message. The message here is that the commute is much more enjoyable. Driving somewhere is fun while you're listening to any one of these thousands of audiobooks. So we're looking for this question at the portrayal of the woman. There is, of course, pictures of animals. If you can see, there's a snake around her neck and a tiger. She's wearing an imaginary hat, these illustrations, but that's not what this question focuses on. It focuses only on the woman. Now let's take a look at the example. We're looking for the portrayal of the woman in conveying the message of text B. So the woman seems calm, engrossed. She seems relaxed while in her commute. It reveals that listening to an audiobook enhances her journey. Her ability to focus on both the story and driving is evident. So the portrayal of the woman conveys the message that audible.com can change a dreary commute into a flight of fantasy. Or the other possible option, she is expressionless, her face not showing any emotion, does not reveal her being entertained or enthralled by the audiobook. She appears to be more focused on her driving than actually enjoying the experience. Remember, this advertisement, the focus is on making a commute more enjoyable. Now let's look at the last question. As you know, there will always be a comparative question where you take question A or text A and text B and compare those in a specific way. So 1.12 says refer to both text A and text B, but more specifically, make sure you understand the question. Critically discuss is our verb of questioning. The extent to which text B, so that's the entire text B, supports the subheading, only the subheading, and paragraph 4 of text A. So you'll have to go back to each one of these to find the answers. Now there is a very simple recipe in answering. Go to the subheading as stated, from audiobooks to podcasts and voice notes. There's a steady generational shift in the way we understand the world. Now let's take a look at paragraph 4. Here, the generational shift, I'm using my scanning skills. I find the word millennials in particular seem to be all ears. And then if I go down a little bit, the consensus was actually I listen, I don't read, but their parents do so too. All the overloaded, frantically multitasking midlifers trying to keep up with whatever zeitgeist they're afraid of missing out on in an information-saturated world while going for a run or cooking dinner. So that's the essence of what links to the subheading, the generational shift. And then, of course, when we're looking at the visual, this woman is multitasking. She's driving clearly, and she is listening. So that links to the idea of multitasking. Her age can also be an indication of the generational shift. Now let's look at the answer. Again, please make sure that you touch on every point. Start your answer with text B. The woman represents the millennials who are easily able to multitask by listening to an audiobook while driving. So this links text B and the paragraph. This supports the reference to the generational shift in the subheading. Very important, be specific. Don't just say they all fit, they're about the same thing. That won't get you any marks. Be specific. You can see evidence quoted as well. Showing a preference for listening, and the statement in paragraph 4, they seem to be all ears. So that would give you 3 marks for a reference to each one of these texts, and the 4th mark would be for the comment. In paragraph 4 of text A, the writer references a survey conducted by the Wall Street Journal president, which concluded that younger people preferred listening to reading. However, this phenomenon is not restricted to the younger generation. Our answer continues. The statement, frantic multitasking midlifers going for a run or cooking dinner, of course, is echoed in the message of text B because the woman is listening to an audiobook while she's driving. The subheading and paragraph 4 of text A, as well as text B, show that while reading is not dead, there is definitely a shift to the audiobook market, to listening. So 4 marks will be credited if you reference the subheading, paragraph 4, and text B with a critical discussion. Now, before we continue with our lesson, let's go for a quick ad break. Grade 12s. Welcome back to this lesson on reading for meaning and understanding grade 12s. Reading for meaning and understanding, of course, falls under reading and viewing, and our focus today has been the comprehension. We focused on reading strategies, verbs of questioning and the requirements of each of those, scaffolding of questions and using a strategic approach to the question order, and then answering techniques. Key words that you should be aware of: skimming, reading quickly through the text to get a general idea of the content without focusing on the details. Scanning, that means rapidly searching through the text to find specific information. You'll do that while you're answering the questions. Of course, in context is very important. Here you provide reasons and a response that considers the surrounding information of the text. The style is also very important. That is how a writer writes, including his or her word choice and sentence structure. Other key words that you need to be aware of and you need to understand is diction. There will always be a diction question that focuses on word choice or vocabulary. The tone is the writer's attitude towards the subject, also shown through diction. Irony, of course, is very important. That is a contrast between what is expected and what occurs, or the intended meaning is the opposite of what is said. Satire is also very important, using humor, irony, sarcasm, or exaggeration to criticize, expose, or highlight human weaknesses in an attempt to change the situation. And the last word is imagery, using descriptive words or figures of speech to create pictures in the reader's mind. Common errors and misconceptions that we find is not following the question's requirements precisely. Make sure you answer all parts. Giving generic answers without substantiation. Always give evidence from the text. Misunderstanding questions or lifting from the text without an explanation. And of course, difficulty with irony, tone, diction, and the graphical interpretation of text B. Exam writing competency skills include reading, critical thinking, time management, information retrieval, communication skills, active learning methods, and vocabulary skills. Here are some further practice questions for you to go and do to prepare for your next exam paper. You can use 2021, 1.6, 7, 8, and 11. 2020 November paper, 6, 7, 10, and 11, all from question 1. 2019 November, question 1.6, 1.8, 1.10 and 1.11. And then from the May-June 2019 paper, 1.8, 1.10 and 1.11. These are all questions that focus on what we did today. You can also go to the Eastern Cape and use their September 2020 paper, 1.6, 1.12 and 1.13, or from 2019, their September paper, 1.7, 10 and 1.11. Thank you so much for joining me, Grade 12s. I hope that this helped you, and I hope that you will take what you learned today into your next exam and that it will bring you great success. I hope to see you very soon. Goodbye.